So, this is lesson 3 of our delving into music theory. Okay. And today we're going to be talking about an extremely important topic, and that is pitch. I feel like I say it's an extremely important topic in front of like every lesson, but it all really is very important. So, pitch. Now, if you've watched my previous lesson about the elements of music, which by the way, if you haven't, I would really encourage you to do so. We talked a little bit about pitch, and we learned that it's one of the 4 basic elements of music. Now, just to catch you up as to what pitch really is, it's just a measure of how high or low a sound is. A sound is. I have to excuse the background noise. So, just to give you an intuitive understanding, that would be the difference between, let's say, this and this. So, one was lower, one was high. That's a difference in pitch. Now, as for how we musically represent this and how we've chosen to divide it, well, you could have an infinite number of pitches, but we've divided it up in such a way that we have a fixed number of pitches, and these actually correspond to the keys on the piano. So, as you can see, we've got a snippet of the piano here. So, each key on a piano is a specific pitch. So, the difference between any key on a piano has to do with its pitch. For example, this key would be higher than that key, which would be higher than that key, and so on and so forth. So, without any further ado, let's start talking about what different pitches we have. And I'm sure you must have heard in the context of music, A, B, F sharp, G sharp, C, D. It's from all the time, and these are all pitches. These are all pitches. And I'll write down in just a moment. They're all pitches: A, B, C, F sharp, G sharp, B, C, D, E, F. These are all pitches. These are and all correspond to keys on the piano. So, as you're getting which pitches we have, there are there are 7 natural pitches. This is very important. There are 7 natural pitches, and these are the first 7 letters of the alphabet. So that would be A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And these are all pitches, by the way. These are all pitches. All keys on the piano, all pitches. And these are the first 7 letters of the alphabet. And I can actually play them on the piano. So I'll do that for you. So this is A, then this is B, and C, D, E, F, G, then we come back to A. And this coming back to A is something that I'll be talking about at the end of this lesson. So do stick around for that, because it's a very important concept. So I'll play for you again. So we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and we come back to A. Don't worry, if you're confused by that, we'll talk about it at the end of this lesson. So these are the 7 natural pitches. And I can actually write down on the piano which keys they correspond to. So the 7 natural pitches are all the white keys on the piano. Remember that much. So the 7 natural pitches are all the white keys on the piano. And in the snippet I have over here, it actually starts on C. So we have C. Then the next key after that is D. The next key after that is E. And the next key after that is F. The next key after that is G, A, B, and then we come back to C. Again, this coming back to the thing that we're talking about in just a bit. Now, so this is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And I can play that for you, starting on C. It sounds like this: C, B, E, F, G, A, B, and then we come back to C. We only use the first 7 letters of the alphabet for this, mind you. So there is no H or I. There is no H, no I. It's just the first 7 letters of the alphabet which go on repeat. So these are the 7 natural pitches, and just with these pitches you can actually write a lot of music. So let's take one of Mozart's most famous piano sonatas, and that's only in terms of the seven natural pitches. So I play it for you, the right hand part. Something like that. So that's more. I can play for you again. And that's only using these seven natural pitches: A B C D E F G A B C D E F G, right? And only these ones. We're only using these seven natural pitches, and you can do a lot with these. A lot of music is in fact only in terms of these seven natural pitches, and these are quite powerful tools. In other terms, only on the white keys. But you might say that, well, these are all the white keys. What about these black keys here? What are they? So these are the seven natural pitches, but they are in fact some pitches which come in between our natural pitches. Sometimes there's a pitch in between any two given natural pitches. So let's explore that. So there's a pitch in between C and D, right? Or you can think of it, if the word pitch is confusing you, there's a key in between C and D, and we call this key C sharp. I'll write it here. Yes, you can call this key C sharp. In fact, let me not use that right now. So ignore the piano. That was a bad mistake. That was not a good idea. So C, D. In between them, there's a key called C sharp, and there's another name for this key. It's also called D flat. So C sharp and D flat, and this is a pitch that comes in between C and D. It's right in between. So I'll play for you. I'll play it for you so you get an idea. This is C. This is D, and this is C sharp. Again, C, D, and C sharp. And I'll play it in like a chromatic order now so you can figure out what I mean. C, C sharp, D. So you can see that C sharp is exactly in between C and D. That's a pitch right in between. Now as for what this terminology sharp flat means, I'm going to clear it right now. So this key right here, this one that's in between C and D, you could think of it as slightly making C slightly higher, right? You could think of it as a slightly higher version of C. Think about it. You can think of this key right here as a slightly higher version of C. So this slightly higher, doing the slightly higher thing we call in music jargon as sharpening. So when we're making something slightly higher, we're sharpening it in music. And you could also, from the flip side though, you could think of this key as not as making C slightly higher, but you could think of it as making D slightly lower. And in that case, when we make something slightly lower in music, we call that flattening. So hence the name C sharp and D flat. So when we think C sharp, we're thinking of it as a slightly higher version of C, and when we say C sharp, and then when we say D flat, we're thinking of it as a slightly lower version of D. So that's where this terminology comes from. And when we're writing sharps, whenever we're writing things out like this, when we write a sharp, no, in fact, let me write it like this. A sharp looks kind of like a hashtag. It's not exactly the same, but for all intents and purposes, you can think of it as it looks kind of like a hashtag. So if I'm writing C sharp, I would write it like this. As an example, C sharp, I would write like this. And as for when I want to write flat, we write a flat kind of like a lowercase b. It looks something like this. So it's slightly more pointy form of a lowercase b. It doesn't look exactly like a lowercase b, but it's slightly more pointy. And if I want to write D flat in the example, I do that. So D, and when we write flat, we usually keep it at the top, like this. So let's have a look here. So sharp is kind of like a hashtag, and we write it like that. And flat is kind of like a small b, and we write it like that. So that's where this terminology comes from. And yeah, so now we would write this key. Hopefully we can identify it as C sharp, and write its counterpart up here, maybe here, or we could think of it as D flat. Remember, these C sharp, D flat are the same key. It's literally it is the same black key, but it's just two different names for the same pitch. Okay, now let's talk. There is also a pitch between D and E, or that you can say the black key there. So the pitch which comes exactly between D and E, and that is D sharp, or we also call it E flat. Oh god, my E looks like it's dying, but yeah, D sharp, E flat, and the logic remains the same. So again, I'll play it for you on the piano so you get a more intuitive understanding. This is D, this is D sharp, and this is E. So you can see E flat or D sharp is right in between D and E. So we write it as D sharp, E or E flat. Now this is very important. There is no pitch, there is no key, no pitch in between E and F. There is no pitch in between E and F. No pitch in between E and F. That's very important. And you can see there's no key there either. So there's no pitch between E and F. Okay, now moving on to F and G. I encourage you to pause the video and guess what I would call this pitch right here, which is right in between F and G. So I'm hoping you pause the video and give it a go. And the answer is F sharp. I would call this F sharp, or I would call it G flat. Then the pitch between G and A, there is one, and it's called G sharp or A flat. And the pitch between A and B is called A sharp or B flat. And once again, very important, there is no pitch in between B and C. There's no key there. And because there's no pitch between E and F and no pitch between B and C, that's why if you look at a piano, you'll see this kind of pattern where it's 2 and 3 and 2 and 3. There's no black key here because there's no pitch between E and F. So let's just recap. So there are 7 natural pitches, right? The white keys on the piano, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and we keep on going like that. And then there are some pitches which come in between these pitches. They're not as high as D, but they're not as low as C. They're right in between, as high as the one as their adjacent counterparts. So these are sharps or flats. We call them sharps and or flats, and we can write them as saying the sharp of the one that it's slightly higher to, or the flat as the one that is slightly lower to. So always think of it as the logic as C sharp is a slightly higher version of C and D flat is a slightly lower version of D. Same note, same pitch, but you can think of it as a slightly higher version of C or a slightly lower version of D. And this continues, but there is no pitch, there is no key in between E and F, and there is no pitch or no key between B and C. Okay, now let's elaborate a little bit. So I'm going to play all of them. Maybe I want to keep the piano here for some further reference. I'm going to play all of these pitches, including the sharps and flats, in one sequence, and let's see what it sounds like. So I'm going to start on C, because that's usually customary. So this is C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and we come back to C. So now I'll play it once again, but without me talking, so you can hear it better. So as you can see, it's almost like we're covering all our bases here. So this, and when I play all of these pitches, and if you count them in total, there are 12 pitches. So let me write that down because that's an important note. In total, there are 12 pitches if you counted all of them, and you can double check this. Just go up to the keyboard right here and count them. There are 12 pitches, and when I play them in sequence, if I play these 12 pitches in sequence, we call that, and this is just a fancy word, a chromatic scale. So if I play these 12 pitches, these 12 musical pitches, the 12 basic musical pitches in sequence, one after the other, that is called a chromatic scale. And this is a very important term that you understand. It's a really fancy, like, hi-fi term. It's really wordy, but it sounds cool. But yes, you should definitely know and understand this term thoroughly. A chromatic scale. Okay, cool. So some notes about chromatic scales. So if I had to write a chromatic scale in C, I'd write it like this: C, and then C sharp, and then going on, including all the sharps and flats. Now, where now a note on chromatic scales is when to use sharps and when to use flats. Now, as a general rule, you can use a sharp or flat whenever you want, if you're just writing music. But when you're writing a chromatic scale, there are some rules. They're very simple. So if you're writing an ascending chromatic scale, that means you're going up from a low whatever, let's say a low C, to a high C, higher version of that C. So this to that. If you're playing it ascending, then you must use only sharps. So you write all those black keys only in terms of sharps. So I'll play it for you. So ascending chromatic scale sounds like this. And if I wrote that down like this, like in terms of C, C sharp, D, D sharp, I would only use sharps, no flats. Contrastingly, if I write a descending scale, where I go from a high C to a lower C, or a high any note, higher any pitch to a lower any pitch, I would write only in terms of flats. So I'm going from C, then and I'll play a descending one for you without me talking, so you can hear it better. I'll play it once again. So I went from a higher version of that note to a lower. So when I'm going down, when I'm descending, I use only flats. So if I was going C, then I'd go B, then I'd go B flat. Remember, there's no pitch between C and B. That's why I didn't write a C flat, for example. Then I'd write A, then I'd write A flat, and so on and so forth until I reach C again. So whenever you go ascending, let's just revise that because this is a lot of information. Whenever you go ascending, you only use sharps when you're writing it down, terminology wise. And when you're going descending, you only use flats. And if you want a reason for this, well, this is just a convention. This is the way we usually write things. And an intuitive way of understanding maybe why we might use this kind of convention is because when we're going ascending, we're thinking of each note being successively higher. So you want to think of each new note being a higher version of the old note, hence using sharps. And when you're going down, you want to play successfully lower notes, thinking of each next note as a lower version of the first note, hence flats. But that's just my conjecture. Honestly, this is just a convention that musicians have come up with after hundreds of years, and it's best that you stick to it if you want everyone to understand what you're saying. So anyways, this is how it works. So let's just revise what we've learned for now till now, before I go to my final point about what is this repeating business. Um, so pitches is it's a measure of how pitch is a measure of how high or low a sound is. That's the difference between this and that. One was higher, one was lower. It's a difference in pitch. Now in music, we divide the entire body of pitch into discrete pitches. Okay, and these correspond to keys on the piano. These are different keys on the piano, and we write them down. When we're writing them down on paper, we say A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So there are seven natural pitches or white keys on the piano, and those are the first seven letters of the alphabet: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But aside from these natural pitches, there are also sub pitches that come in between these natural pitches, which are not as high as one and not as low as the other. So these are called sharps or flats. And we write, and these are the black keys on the piano essentially. and a sharp is represented with a hashtag, and a flat is represented with a small b, which is slightly towards the top. And one key can be written as the sharp of the one that comes before it or the flat of the one that comes after it, and I've explained why that's the case. So including sharps and flats, which is very important, there are 12 pitches, 12 musical pitches in total. Very important number, very important number, 12 pitches. And when we play these 12 pitches in sequence, one after the other, it's called a chromatic scale. Fancy word, but important word. And when we play this, when we're writing down a chromatic scale, when we play it ascending, that means we're going up from a lower version to a higher version, from a low C to a high C. We're going up like this. We write it only in terms of sharps. And when we're going down from a higher C to a lower C, we write it only in terms of flats. From any note to another note. So now I've left some resources after this lesson in form of worksheets. And I'll be doing this a lot more often as we tackle more and more complicated topics. So one of the questions in those worksheets is, let's say write an and this is always there in music exams. Write an, well, very basic music exams. So there'll be write an ascending chromatic scale. I'll just shorten it to CS because I don't want to waste your time. Ascending chromatic scale from A or at A or on A, whatever. And the way I do this is I would just start on A and I would write A, all the pitches in between until I reach another A. So I will demonstrate what I mean. So what is ascending, right? So I need to go from one pitch to the higher pitch. So you can just look at the keyboard. What comes after A? Well, there's A sharp. And remember, I'm using sharps because we're going ascending. Then after A sharp, there's B. Then after B, C. Remember, no pitch in between B and C. It's just C. Then we have C sharp. Then we have D. Then we have D sharp. Then we have E. Then we have F. No E sharp. There's no, well, yeah, there's no pitch between E and F. No pitch between E and F. F. We've still not reached A yet, so we're not done. And if you count these, they're not 12 yet. F sharp, G, G sharp, and we finally reach A again. So you have to write it out like this. And if I play a chromatic scale on A, which I can do, just that it's always good to hear things in addition to learning the writing way. So, oh sorry, no, I went too far. Done. So that's a ascending chromatic scale on A. And if I were asked at a descending, I'd go A, A flat, G, G flat, like that. Now this is a lot, I understand. I'm sure you must be. So that's why I've left that worksheet. And there's an answer key at the end. So even if you don't feel you've understood this, I still recommend you do that worksheet and look at the answer key and try to figure out what you're doing wrong. And when in doubt, just picture a keyboard or keep a picture of the keyboard, or like, you can take a screenshot of this what I've drawn for you right now, and this will help you understand what exactly you have to write. And it is nothing too special about the piano which I'm using. It's just that it is a very good way of laying down all the musical pitches that we have. So I've left that worksheet and I really encourage you to go do it, because whether it's practical music or it's theoretical music, it's all about practice. Everything is about practice. So I really do encourage you to go through that worksheet and finish it for your own benefit. Okay, and this has been a really long lesson. I'm sure you're all waiting for it to finish. But one final note before we're done. And that is, what is this whole repeating business? Why do I have C, D, E, F, G, B, then why do I have C again? And in fact, you've only shown me a really small snippet. You've shown me like, what was this, 13 keys? What about the rest of the piano? What about this side of the piano? What about that side of the piano? And you would be very right for asking that question, and I've been putting you off till the end, but hopefully I have a satisfying answer for you. Now, these 12 pitches, these 12 musical pitches go on repeat throughout the keyboard. So before I go any further, let me just tell you, whenever you go from one of these 12 pitches to a higher version of the other, directly higher, like from this C to that C, it's called an octave. So I have an octave right here. This is one octave of the piano. That's what an octave is. I'm sure you must have heard that word before. So you have you have a low octave, then you have another octave after that, and you have another octave after that. These go on repeat. And the reason, and this is the reason that we do this is because if I play a C and I play one that is, and I play a higher version of that C, let's say this and this, they sound very similar. So similar, in fact, that we have termed this to just be a higher version of that C. So if I play it at an octave interval, this is C, that C. It sounds so similar, it seems as a higher version. We just call it a higher version. And if you're a maths lover, you'd love to know that this is because the pitch of a higher note, a higher version of any pitch, so a higher C as compared to the old C, is double. So exactly double. So if my low C was 220 hertz, my high C would be 440 hertz. But that's maths, and you don't have to worry about maths here, hopefully. So these octaves go on repeat. So it's best that, yes, there's a lot of information. It's best that I give you an intuitive understanding by playing. So I'm going to start on a really low C here, and I'm going to play all the way till this high C here. And you can see, again, just to give you an understanding, these sound so similar that we just call it a higher note. That's why this whole repeating business happens. And this is applicable for every pitch, not just C. Maybe A. This one sounds so similar to that one that we just call it a higher version of A. So let me play you a chromatic scale, which is just all the pitches in series, remember that, starting from C, and I'm going to go all the way up from this C to that C. So I have this really low C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, and I'll stop talking now. B, and let me start again. We repeat C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B. Repeat again. C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, A, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. We already repeated. Then we go again. C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B. Repeat again. C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. And we're done. So this one octave goes on repeat, and we have like low ones, medium ones, and then high ones. And that's a really difficult concept to understand, but hopefully as you learn some more music with me and by yourself, you'll get an intuitive understanding. And again, we do that because any pitch that is an octave interval, which means it's one octave away, like this C and that C, they sound so similar to each other that we call this one just a higher version of that. And then same for maybe C sharp, this C sharp, that C sharp, they sound so similar, we just say this is a higher version. And same for D. And if you do that for all the pitches, which is what we do, you just get it repeating perpetually. So you have C all the way till, then you start again, C, 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 and so on and so forth. And just to demonstrate that this is actually true, I'll play something really low, maybe here. I'll play just a short melody, and I'm going to play it higher, and you will find out one octave higher, and you'll find out it sounds the same. So I'll play it here. And I can play that an octave higher, and it sounds like the same music. And that's because of this relation, and that's why we keep on saying it repeats. I can even play it 3 octaves higher. So that's the intuition for it. Now, summarizing all of this is just that this one octave goes on repeat throughout the piano. We start from the lower parts, and it keeps these letters keep on going on repeat till the end. And again, that's a difficult concept to tackle, but hopefully I've made it easier for you. If not, there are a variety of resources on the internet which can help you understand why this happens if I fail to. Regardless, hopefully this lesson was really long, half an hour long lesson now was helpful to you. Hopefully you learned some useful things about pitch. Yeah, I really should make shorter lessons. And chromatic scales, and this is there's no real way to really soften the blow. You really just have to jump into learning about this kind of pitches. But hopefully I made it easy for you, and I have left a worksheet where I talk about chromatic scales, and I really recommend you do this because this intuition for where there are no black keys and where there are black keys comes through practice. So I really strongly recommend you go do that worksheet, and even if you get everything wrong, it's okay. It's just a way for you to learn. So I've left like multiple problems. Try doing the first three, check if you're right, then try check if what's wrong with it, etc., etc., and keep on going. And when in doubt, just imagine a piano or draw a piano, and you'll have your answers. So I really do recommend you go to that worksheet because it's really important that you do for your further understanding. That being said, I thank you so much for sticking with me for this half an hour and sitting and learning music. And I hope you learned something valuable. And I'll see you next lesson where we talk about a little bit about how we write down these pitches on the staff. See you.